Adidas and Puma are two of the biggest rivals in shoes. But did you know that their founders were two halves of a once happy family business that turned into a level of brother rage so intense it will get the sneakerheads' tongues a-wagging? See what I did there? In the 1930s, the Dassler Brothers Sports Shoe Company in Bavaria made the most kick-ass athletic shoes in all the land. The company even gave Jesse Owens a pair of shoes to compete in the '36 Olympics. When Jesse won, the brothers' shoes blew up. But all of that success was not good for their relationship. Tensions flared. Some say there was stealing, affairs, resentment. And after World War II, the brothers were so out of step, they eventually ended the company. In 1949, Adolf, or Addy Dassler, formed Adidas, a play on his nickname. Rudolf Dassler started Puma because, well, that name is awesome. The brothers sued each other many times over the years, over all sorts of design and trademark issues, costing each other a fortune in lawyers and suits. Their two factories, built in the same Bavarian village of Herzogenaurach, polarized the community with local people picking sides by picking shoes. The brothers died 2 years apart. They are buried at opposite ends of the village graveyard, proof that even in death, there remained a great bitter divide between them. And so it was for decades, until 2009. Employees of Adidas and Puma, in the village where the two companies still have their headquarters, came together and played a friendly soccer match and started the process of healing decades of enmity and began a new era of love and shoes.
Annie Londonderry is famous for being the first woman to bicycle around the world. But there's more to the story, and the story starts, as most things do, in a dark bar.
There is no possible way a woman could ride a bicycle around the world.
Can you imagine a woman trying to do it in a skirt?
If a woman could do that, I'd pay $10,000.
I, Annie Londonderry, will take that wager.
When Annie took that wager, she was oozing with confidence and charisma. But here's the thing, she had never even touched a bicycle. In the late 1800s, bicycles were seen as dangerous for women and very unfeminine. Riding a bicycle was a revolutionary act. Legend has it, she cycled from Boston to New York City to Paris, riding her bike one-footed after an injury, to India, hunting tigers with royalty, Singapore, Hong Kong, getting caught up in a war and sustaining a gunshot wound in her shoulder, Nagasaki, being interned in a Japanese prison. How did she get over oceans? Don't worry about it. San Francisco, Los Angeles, Phoenix, and all the way back to Boston in exactly 15 months. She did it. The end.
Well, not all of that was exactly true.
And you are?
I'm Peter Zeutlin, and Annie was my great-grandaunt.
Okay, so then what actually happened?
She was full of tall tales. Even her name, Annie Londonderry, wasn't real. Her real name was Annie Cohen Kopchowski. She even concocted the story of the wager, and she definitely was not shot or thrown into a prison during the Chinese-Japanese War.
Well, what about all that other stuff, like the leg injury?
She did injure her leg.
How about hunting for tigers with royalty?
That's false.
So, with some true stuff and some not-so-true stuff, how do you view her journey?
Although hers was a remarkable physical achievement, her real achievement was becoming world famous as a symbol of the women's liberation movement in the 1890s.
Annie's sheer audacity and the way she fought for herself, for her own adventures, on her own terms, was remarkable for her time. Even if her story was kinda, sorta, not totally accurate.
It was spring 1967. LBJ was in the White House, the Vietnam War was in full swing, and the biggest musical act in America was the Monkees. And that same spring, a chance encounter in New York City's Greenwich Village would kick off one of the strangest and most ill-fated intersections of pop culture in history. Here's Monkees drummer Mickey Dolenz.
Somebody said, you got to come down and see this incredible guitar player that plays guitar with his teeth. There was no name attached, nothing.
That no-name guitar player was none other than rock and roll legend in the making, Jimi Hendrix.
Flash forward
to June of that year. It's the Monterey Pop Festival.
And I'm sitting in the audience. All of a sudden, out walks these three incredibly decorated characters. And I just remember going, that's the guy that plays guitar with his teeth. And of course, by then, they were the Jimi Hendrix experience.
Mickey was impressed.
Everybody was blown away. And I told our producers, you got to check this guy out, because we were looking for an opening act.
And despite some fairly obvious differences in musical style, a deal was struck.
Sure enough, the opening act for the Monkees was the Jimi Hendrix Experience.
A new group, Jimi Hendrix Experience, traveling with the Monkees, and they joined the Monkees concert tour.
So the two acts hit the road. But as it turned out, fans who had come to see the Monkees weren't quite sure what to make of Jimi Hendrix.
He would go on stage to open the act, and he'd be going, "Foxy lady, we want Davy, we want the monkey." It was kind of embarrassing, frankly.
And things didn't get much better as the tour continued. And after only 7 shows, Jimi had had enough.
I did hear the rumor at one of the last shows he finally flipped off the audience. I don't blame him, frankly.
And just like that, the unlikely marriage of Hendrix and the Monkees had come to an end. Jimi, of course, went on to be, well, Jimi Hendrix.
Possibly the greatest rock and roll guitarist ever, as far as I'm concerned. I'd like to think that we might have had something to do with it, but I think he would have done okay without opening for the Monkees.
Imagine remembering every single day of your life, all in perfect detail. For those with highly superior autobiographical memory, or HSAM for short, this is their reality.
I remember everything that's personally happened to me since I was born.
That's Rebecca Sharrock. I was fascinated by this condition, so I called her up to find out more.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi.
How are you going?
Oh, I'm doing all right. It's a very wet Saturday morning here. How are you going?
Side note, in this moment, I just realized Rebecca will remember that this day was a wet morning forever.
So, you remember everything in great detail?
People can remember what they did last Saturday, but I can remember what I did Saturday 10 years ago.
What about a memory from when you were just a baby?
When I was 12 days old, I was lying down on the fur car seat in my parents' car, and I was staring up at the steering wheel, and I thought, what is that?
Rebecca is one of only 60 people worldwide to have been identified with having HSAM.
All through my teenage years, I thought that everybody remembered in this kind of way. I thought it was completely normal.
It wasn't until she was 21 when her parents decided to submit her to the University of California to undergo 2 years of testing. After this, she was officially identified as having HSAM. Since memories can come to mind unexpectedly any time of day, a negative memory like this can make living with HSAM difficult.
Mum was putting me in this itchy satin dress and I was crying because I didn't like it, and Mum gave me this Minnie Mouse toy and I couldn't say anything at the time, but her face terrified me.
But on most days, HSAM is a gift. Rebecca can recall happy memories and moments when times get tough.
A good memory, it makes me so thankful about having this kind of HSAM memory.
Thanks for chatting, Rebecca.
Yep, thanks. Bye.
In 1904, St. Louis hosted an Olympic marathon for the ages. Overshadowed by the neighboring World's Fair, the poorly planned event was reduced to a lackluster sideshow, primed for disaster. During a sweltering 90-degree day, the runners were thrust onto a hellish route that cut through car traffic, rocks, thick dust, and 300-foot hills. Of the 32 athletes who competed, only 14 finished. And of the 14, these are the 3 worth knowing about. Fred Lors was a fresh-faced athlete ready to make a name for himself. For 9 miles, Lors was near the front of the pack until painful muscle cramps stopped him in his tracks. Yikes. And he wasn't the only one. Almost every single racer had severe muscle cramps that day thanks to this dummy, chief event organizer and amateur scientist James Sullivan. You see, Sullivan turned the event into an experiment to grasp how purposeful dehydration affects athletes. Immune to common sense, Sullivan put a single water station at the 11th mile mark. So for 26 miles, the runners relied on one water station that was dirty and gave you dysentery. James Sullivan, what a guy. Oops. Anyway, back to Lors. With the sun beating down, road dust clogging his lungs, and his muscles spazzing in protest, Lors had enough and traded in his 2 legs for 4 wheels. He hitched a car ride to the 19th mile mark, got out, and gingerly ran through the finish line. The crowd went wild, but before the gold medal could be placed around his neck, his ruse was discovered. Next up, Andrin Carbajal. He was a 5-foot-tall Cuban national and former mailman turned athlete. To get to St. Louis, Carbajal had to raise money by competing in running events, including a 700-mile race across Cuba. Once he got to St. Louis, he was easy to spot. Among the sleeveless shirts and thigh-high shorts, Carbajal wore a billowing long-sleeve shirt, cut-off slacks, and work boots. He didn't dress like a sports champion, but damn did he run like one. With each and every step, Carbajal charged towards the finish line. Even though his legs never gave out, his grumbling stomach did. To satisfy his hunger, he ate some apples from a nearby orchard that turned out to be rotten. So he took a little recovery nap and then proceeded to finish in 4th place. And then there's Thomas Hicks, the gold winner, the top dog, the champion, the barely standing living cadaver. You see, Hicks was so physically ill that he couldn't cross the finish line without the help of his trainers. Why? Well, back then stimulants were legal, and strychnine, a type of rat poison, was thought to have performance-enhancing properties. So during the run, his trainers gave him small doses to gain an edge. But instead of helping him, it was slowly killing him. Once Hicks was dragged across the finish line, he wasn't in a cheery mood. Having lost 8 pounds during the race, he was a hollowed-out husk of a man. The judges shrugged and gave Hicks the gold, ending the nightmare. As the crowd swooned over Hicks' disheveled body, somewhere in the stands, James Sullivan was probably sipping on a glass of fresh water, feeling proud of putting together the worst marathon ever.